Hello and welcome to this internal and external analysis report on Uber. This report will generally examine the external and industry environments, followed by an internal and competitor analysis. We will also present three key areas of improvement and a recommended path forward to tackle each of these recommendations. Ultimately, we will focus on our recommendations and provide a brief implementation plan. We will begin with a brief introduction to Uber, a company that stemmed from the entrepreneurial spirit of Garrett Camp, Oscar Salazar, and Travis Kalanick. Uber in 2009 was a first mover into the transportation network company industry, mostly referred to as ride sharing, with a focus to connect users, in this case riders, to service suppliers, drivers, via a well-developed and user-friendly mobile phone application. Since its inception, Uber has led the pack in terms of revenue as well as its ability to raise funding. However, the company has also continuously struggled year on year to turn a profit, mainly driven by their costly expansion program, targeted at ensuring a global footprint, and its model of subsidizing both riders and drivers in an attempt to underprice its competitors and secure usage volumes. Another big aspect of Uber's financial challenges is its sizable spend on R&D, as the company is a strong contestant on the self-driving car race. Ultimately, the main question centers around Uber's viability as a business in light of its current market valuation, struggles to become profitable, and the pressure stemming from the five industry forces. Focusing on the external environment, we postulate that the TNC industry is directly influenced by the seven segments shown on the image. With regards to the demographic segment, the industry is well known for its operations on a global footprint, and companies in the industry have either selected a global strategy, such as Uber, or have focused operations such as Lyft in North America and Didi in China as examples. Studies have shown that the key age group utilizing TNC services range between 16 and 34 years old, with over 90% of the surveyed mass having used a rideshare service before. Research in the US also indicates that the core user base is concentrated in mid-tier income individuals, with lower numbers across low and high income base brackets. In terms of the political segment, since its inception, Uber and others in the industry have targeted focus markets, whether globally or locally, depending on the firm's strategy. And the players are keen to adjusting their service offering, focused on tailoring the business offering to the given location. As the industry concentrates on growth and profitability, the companies are aggressive in terms of market penetration to emerging economies, as well as sustaining operations in developed economies. As seen later in the presentation, firms in this space target global funding to sustain growth. With the trend towards orange economies, also known as creative economies, developing countries see Uber and other technology-based enterprises as key drivers for sustained economical growth. Moving on to the technological segment, players in the industry are drivers of technological change, and you can argue that Uber as a first mover has pioneered a change in the transportation industry. This said, companies in the TNC space must continue to capitalize on their innovative approach, not only from a platform standpoint, but also focus on key initiatives such as driverless cars and integration with other platforms. Given the landscape, players in the industry are faced with strong pressure from current competitors in terms of technology advancement. As we examine the political segment, we see that there is substantial pressure on the industry players to adhere to local regulations in areas such as revision of the contractual agreements between companies and its drivers, instilling background checks on drivers, imposing VAT on other sales on local taxes, etc. The industry continues to face challenges in terms of regulation of this service, and this will pose a new threat to the viability of the business model moving forward. Our assessment of the influence of the sociocultural, global, and physical segments on the TNC industry yields that the three segments cross in terms of the pressure the industry is facing on areas such as social responsibility, diversity and inclusion, compliance to regulation in areas of operation, maintaining user-provider engagement to the firm and sustain loyalty, capture and expansion of user base, both drivers and riders, and ultimately growth in terms of user and driver base to yield financial profitability. As we examine the industry trends, we find that there are five key tendencies that are of importance to Uber as follows. First, there is pressure on industry players to adhere to local regulations. This is important as Uber has based its model on third-party contract agreements with its providers to mitigate the overhead burden. A change in this area will challenge Uber's financial targets amidst their growth strategies. Secondly, firms will continue to pursue investments from local sources. Uber will continue to search for funding to sustain its growth targets. However, the firm will face scrutiny over sources of investment, as an example, Saudi Arabia. As a third trend, we see that there is emerging and strengthening competition in the industry. Uber was a pioneer in the TNC segment. However, given the technology-based nature of the service, entrance barriers are rather weak, and Uber is now facing strong competition. Next, we see a trend in growth of application-based services such as Uber, Airbnb, and others in emerging economies. Uber will continue to play a strong part in emerging economies, as lack of formal employment avenues will enhance the firm's opportunity to expand its network of providers, drivers, and enhance their footprint when benchmarked against local competitors. Lastly, there is the topic of diversity and inclusion. Uber will continue to face pressure from users and providers to align social inclusion and responsibility initiatives globally. At the onset of Uber becoming a publicly traded company, focus on this area is paramount to shareholder buy-in and commitment. Next, we will talk about the industry five forces and how they rank with respect to Uber. First, consumers have many choices when it comes to car services. One can choose from a plethora of applications for a ride or choose the traditional taxi or even public transportation. There is essentially no cost for the customer to leave Uber and choose a different mode of transportation. Consumers who use Uber are very conscious of the price, and the price increase could cost Uber a large portion of their customer base. This makes the bargaining power of buyers very high. Since Uber does not own any vehicles, they rely on their drivers. These are their suppliers. The drivers, similar to that of the consumers, are in a good position for bargaining power. With the rideshare application industry being so competitive, drivers can drive for a different service if they don't get what they want. Next, Uber's business model is transparent and can be replicated easily. Therefore, the threat of new entrants is pretty high. Within this field, there is low entry barriers, which means we see various new companies replicating the Uber business model. The threats of substitutes are also high. Consumers choose to use Uber. They have the choice to use this service instead of taking a taxi or public transportation. It might be more convenient to take Uber. However, public transportation is significantly less expensive. Competition is very high in this industry. Uber not only has to worry about their competitors taking their customers, but also their suppliers. This is just a brief glimpse at Uber's timeline. Throughout its short timeframe, Uber has continued to see large issues arise. The founder of the company became CEO and created a bully culture at the company. Just recently, Uber has introduced Darakosh Rajshahi as CEO. With their new CEO leading the way, Uber is trying to repair its name and brand reputation, which has been plagued by scandals of harassment, gender bias, and the reputation of bending the law to their advantage. The company is also expanding rapidly and diversifying their product line. They started Uber Eats, which they have seen a huge success. They now have helicopters, airplanes, and yachts. Uber's value chain analysis is a little tricky because they don't necessarily have raw materials or shipping and receiving. The value addition for inbound logistics relates to their internet-based business model. Their inbound logistics is for hardware and office equipment needed for their office to run the business. Operationally, Uber is centered around three things. First, the customer requests a ride. Second, the customer completes the ride. And third, the customer pays. Unlike most companies, their operations are very simple due to the customer doing the work for them. Another thing that makes Uber different operationally is that all of their drivers are contract employees. This also changes their operational structure. The application is Uber's main source of value, since this is the tool the customer completes most of the work on. Uber is also different in the outbound logistics space, since again, there's not raw materials being shipped out. This portion of the model would relate back to the Uber application. They are a global transportation company, and the demand for their product comes through their application. Uber traditionally has used social media as their main source of marketing. However, since they have been popular for very unpopular reasons, we have seen a spike in mainstream marketing, recently advertising on television and using print in some cases. Uber only recently has been hypersensitive around customer service and focused on ensuring their drivers are giving the best services to their customers. This is another reason Uber has been advertising on television recently. They are showing the new leadership and showing what they are doing in order to better the company for their customers. For Uber, the customers are key, and since customers have so many available options for this service and there is no cost in switching providers, they have to make sure their customer service is the best. At the heart of the company, technology is what makes this company run. They are hyper vigilant with their application, ensuring they are always improving it and adjusting it accordingly to the customer needs and wants. This entire business model is dependent on their technology and how efficiently and lean Uber is able to run their business. This is the only way they can stay successful within the cost leadership strategy. Uber went from being a small startup to being worth $70 million within 7 years, which the company nor its founders were ready for. This quick success comes at a cost, however. Uber has a positive outlook and is trying to expand and differentiate its products and services in order to cement its success. In terms of business level strategy, Uber, when first started, was based on a cost leader strategy, offering an alternative that was cheaper, faster, and allowed customers to track their ride, which shifted the balance towards the consumer and made the company capable to target a broad customer segment. They found ways to lower their own costs, which helped them run a lean business and be competitive. Currently, we can see the company integrated a new business level strategy with offering premium services such as airplanes, yachts, and helicopters for people to use. They are moving towards a focused differentiation offering, and the combination of cost leadership and focused differentiation will help this business grow. This allows Uber to still be able to compete for its customers on a broader scale and continue to see growing its global footprint. Next, we will focus on Uber's direct competitors within the TNC industry. We have identified three key players in the industry that are direct competitors to Uber, namely Lyft in the US, Ola in India, and Didi in China. Albeit other services exist in the TNC space, the three companies mentioned are at the forefront of the competitive landscape with Uber, given their ability to raise funding, the volume of their user base, and their technological efforts. Lyft, started in 2012, is Uber's direct competitor in the US and Canadian market and has raised over $4.5 billion since its inception. Lyft's current strategy aims at continued market share growth in the US and Canada. In addition, Lyft announced in late 2017 that the company would seek global expansion through partnerships with local ride-hailing services such as Didi in China and Ola in India. Lyft also aims at neutralizing Uber's for supplier market domination via driver engagement. Lyft's plans for the future are centered in firstly outperform the competition in terms of sustained growth as well as profitability. Secondly, it is clear that Lyft is aiming at creating a competitive advantage over its rivals by focusing their efforts on feasible driverless car technology. The company currently has a division with over 300 engineers on staff focused on developing Lyft's own technology rather than seeking partnerships with leading automotive industry players. Started in 2012, Didi is a mobile transportation platform focused on the Chinese market with presence in over 400 cities in country. The service offers both taxi hailing services via its online application and offers private car services as well. Didi has raised over $14.5 billion through backing from major companies such as Alibaba and Apple. Didi has set itself apart in China through its capability to subsidize both rides for end users as well as drivers, initially targeting market domination locally by trumping over Uber. This resulted in Uber selling its Chinese operations to Didi in 2016. Didi's plans include international expansion as noted by strategic partnerships with Lyft in the North American market and other platforms in Mexico and Brazil. Didi also devotes a substantial portion of their revenue to R&D focused on ride-sharing technologies, smart urban transportation systems, and self-driving vehicles to support these initiatives. Didi has opened an R&D center in California and is targeting top talent from around the globe. Didi faces pressure from competitors in China, who are also raising substantial funding and pose threats with regards to local market share. Ola, established in 2010, focuses on the Indian market with strong presence in the country's major cities and, in contrary to Uber and other competitors, bases its operation mainly in consolidating taxi drivers throughout their online platform and linking them to drivers. Ola has raised over $3 billion and has been expanding operations to Australia and the UK. Ola is very focused on driver and passenger safety and has established a program to increase its capabilities in the Indian market through improved rider experience with an aim to offer a sense of security to the user via assist driver technologies and collaborates with Microsoft to develop required platforms for user entertainment and fleet management. In contrast to the other three players in this analysis, Ola has no plans on developing self-driving technology. The four firms compete in the same space, which focuses on connecting drivers to users via online interaction and albeit presence in different sectors, like bike sharing, food delivery, etc. The ride-hailing business is the key driver for revenue across the four enterprises. None of the four competitors, Uber, Lyft, Didi, and Ola, are publicly traded. The financial performance will be evaluated against total revenue and EBIT. The figure shown presents a historical revenue comparison across the industry. The industry is clearly showing signs of sustained growth in terms of revenue as presented in the figure. The total market captured by the four main players grew from around USD 5.4 billion to 21 billion. Uber leads the market in terms of revenue generation, however, is showing signs of year-on-year revenue growth deceleration, which could be tied to both ceasing operations in several locations such as China, as well as competing firms gaining market share. In contrast, Didi and Ola are showing accelerated growth, mainly driven by their high volume markets. Lyft is focused on growth at a sustained pace, which reflects in its stable and almost linear revenue growth trend. Despite sustained revenue growth, the industry continues to operate at a loss, mainly driven by the business model of subsidizing rides for both users and drivers, targeting existing services such as taxi and public transportation by undercharging for services to gain competitive advantage. Many analysts suggest that this business model is unsustainable, and the numbers back this up. The main players are then facing pressure to control their cost base, which would mean either charging more to customers, which would be detrimental as the key differentiator from other services, its price itself. On the other hand, Uber and its competing firms need to look at their cost base in order to reduce their expenditures and target improved profitability. A common strategy is geared towards self-driving vehicles, therefore reducing both the supplier leverage as well as labor costs. A case is to be made for the cost benefit of owning a car fleet, which is currently not the case, and the sunk cost of developing viable and cost-effective unaided driving technologies. Lastly, we evaluated the firm's net profit margin ratio, where we found that, with the exception of Uber, the industry is trending towards profitability, with Didi leading the charge as Uber's main competitor. Didi is gaining ground in terms of profitability as the company has been able to remove operational subsidies in the wake of their market domination in China. Surprisingly, in 2017, Uber experienced a regression on its ability to generate profit. This is highly influenced by the current expenditure program to increase and strengthen their global footprint. Uber operates in a fiercely competitive environment with low entrance barriers, strong leverage from suppliers and users, extreme rivalry between competitors, and ease of substitution. The main areas of competition as the industry continues to mature are on seeking profitability as well as technology development. Uber is under serious threat by Didi, who continues to secure funding from key sources such as Apple and Alibaba, and leads the Chinese market by an ample margin, thus taking full advantage of its volume. These two capabilities position Didi as a market dynamics changer, as Uber did not have until a few years ago as strong as a competitor. Further to this, Didi has similar R&D capabilities and is actively seeking solutions for driverless technologies, in line with what Uber has been doing for a couple of years. However, Didi is taking this research a step forward, focused on seeking solutions applicable to mass transportation and citywide systems, which can become a core competency Uber lacks and may give Didi a competitive advantage. We believe that given Uber's defeat in the high-volume Chinese market, Uber should pursue either a JV or a full takeover with Ola, aimed at securing the inherent volume in India, where Ola dominates. From a technological standpoint, the race is on between Lyft, Uber, and Didi to develop cost-effective technologies to implement driverless car fleets, therefore reducing the labor cost base, which is poised to continue to increase. In terms of seeking profitability and with industry-wide pressure on technological expenditure, the firms competing in this space will either be forced to increase fares or reduce driver fees, both options that would threaten the viability of the service, thus making driverless technology the way forward to seek economies of scale. We have identified the following three key issues. Firstly, Uber needs to become a publicly traded company in order to obtain the much needed resources it needs to increase its growth. In the last quarter of 2017, Uber had spent $40 million. This is a huge amount for any business, let alone one that is off to as rough start as Uber. Uber has to prove it's profitable and has a sustainable business plan in order to be considered for an IPO. Being a publicly traded company will allow Uber the funds it needs in order to continue to grow and be a substantial company. The timeliness of this is everything to Uber due to one of its biggest competitors, Didi, looking to become a public company as well. Secondly, Uber needs to secure a larger market share on a global level. The US continues to be its largest market. However, in order to ensure success and grow, Uber needs to make a large footprint globally. Unfortunately, with all of the problems facing Uber, it's had a hard time being successful in key areas of the world. Allowing its competition to pick up the pace, Uber continues to start and stop in different countries because of the backlash they get due to either regulations, new laws, lawsuits, or competition. In order to complete and sustain, Uber will need to remedy this issue and ensure they are able to operate in these key areas of the world. Third, Uber has negative brand reputation. Uber continuously remains in the spotlight due to their undying controversies. They are dealing with scandals ranging from allegations about one of their top engineers who came from Waymo, stealing trade secrets from Google and using it at Uber, to claims of disparity and lack of diversity at the job site. The external environment of the TNC industry is extremely competitive. In order to obtain and maintain success in this industry, a company needs to be highly competitive, having customers on their side. They also need to be consistently vigilant in growth and taking a larger market share, which includes the entire global market. In order to continue to compete in this environment, Uber has to stay ahead of their competitors and have the best and newest technologies. All of the problems listed previously have slowed Uber down in being competitive within this external environment. The inception of Uber was a brilliant idea, unfortunately, with little strategy behind it. The thought process of the creators was they would have success without much thinking about the obstacles they could encounter. Problems are arising due to the lack of strategy that the company was first founded on. Without a strong strategy and a plan on what your obstacles could be and how you can overcome them, creates a very weak foundation for the business. The founders of Uber had an attitude they were going to have success regardless of what stood in their way. This still hinders this business to the day and essentially contributing to the number of one biggest problem we mentioned previously. Uber being able to obtain an IPO. In our research, we have found that Uber continuously needs more capital in order to expand its reach throughout the world. The only way they are able to do this and compete within their highly competitive industry and create new technology is with more investors. The problem is more complex than this. When a company is focusing on obtaining an IPO, the other parts of their business tend to drop off due to the management undevoted attention to getting to be a publicly traded company. In terms of proposing an implementation plan, we believe that to combat the first problem of getting more investors in order to get additional capital and finally be publicly traded, Uber must first ensure its current daily business is stabilized. They can do this by ensuring the upper management they have in place is able to handle issues that arise without the CEO having to be involved. This will allow the CEO to completely focus on obtaining the IPO. Uber also needs to settle as many lawsuits as it can. This will free up resources the company will need in order to obtain the IPO. Uber has also pulled out of key areas the business was not seeing success in. It needs to continue to do this. The company should reevaluate geographic areas that are not currently profitable and cut their losses and pull out of these areas. Essentially, anything Uber can do to cut down on the unnecessary risk and cost while trying to get their IPO will help. Secondly, in order to compete on a global scale, Uber needs to pick up the pace in some areas of the world. They need to focus on key areas, India, for example. Uber has been limited to the countries they are able to perform in due to regulations protecting taxi services and rideshare companies that were created in that specific country. In order for Uber to be successful globally, they need to ensure they strategize carefully and fully research the region they will be moving into. This will save time, money, and reputational risk, As they expand, they are more exposed to mainly operational and reputational risks. They need to ensure when moving into a new area, they are successfully abiding by any laws and regulations, as well as respecting the specific culture. They can also partner with strong allies in that area. Uber's ability to partner and create allies globally will be a large key to their success. Lastly, we have seen a shift in Uber's business once their new CEO came on board. There are new advertisements showing Uber as a caring company and taking responsibility of their previous actions and decisions. This does help the business. However, due to the onslaught of corruption and scandals, this is an area that still needs a lot of work. In order to combat this further, Uber needs to quickly settle all of these lawsuits and legal issues so they can start putting this behind them. There doesn't seem to be a modern company that has been in the news for all the wrong reasons as much as Uber has. They need to make a big appeal to consumers and have a consistent corporate social responsibility outreach. There needs to be a charity or a community they pick to help and advertise this, for example. They can set up a scholarship for their drivers in order to help them get education, or they can pick a group within a community to help for public outreach. If they can swing the opinion of the majority of consumers in the US, they stand a really good chance of stability. This takes time, effort, and money, but it is an important step that Uber has completely ignored in the past. Thank you for your time.